The following is a presentation of Morning Drive Media.
From the southernmost point of Dorne to the lands of always winter, to what is west of west and the shadows in the east, this is Casterly Talk, the Game of Thrones that make this show stay in our hearts. That's what we're doing here today. Hey, everybody. I'm trying to create gravitas behind that. Who doesn't love gravitas? We are going to be discussing episode 4 of season 1. It's just me today. We're discussing Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. Let's begin and dive on into what we have here. Hello. We got this in a podcast form. You can also watch along on YouTube. Or, hey, if you're Daisy, you'll do both, because that will help out the podcast feed. Give us a like on YouTube. Do all that liking and subscribing and sharing. I've been in the YouTube game long enough on the other side of things, producing and other things. Now this is me. It's me on my channel. Small but mighty. My YouTube channel is a crippled bastard and broken thing too. Let's dive into this episode here. Like I said, we are going into season 1, episode 4. And this episode is I think it's a very, very important episode. I think it is one of the ones that starts to really turn the show into detective stories, mysteries, revelations that we want. And for better or worse, it takes a show and starts pulling you in. And I think that's one of the things I take away from rewatching this episode all these years later. Like, oh yeah, I remember watching this. The original air date was May 8th, 2011, another lifetime ago. And this is what all the themes and lessons and all the things we're going to discuss today out the window. I didn't care about that. I care about what's Ned going to do that he's found Robert's bastard. What does that mean? Who's going to solve this? I think I have a hunch that something's not in the up and up with Joffrey and Robert, right? I mean, Cersei and Jaime, that's their kid, right? Like, this is, oh my God, Ned's our hero and he's going to save the day. That was me on May 8th, 2011. This was directed by Brian Kirk, and the writer is Brian Cogman. This is, again, 4 episodes into season 1, and Cogman was originally hired as a writer's assistant, kind of tracking all the stuff, and he just knew the lore. He was kind of the official lore, keeper of the lore. The show and the books, though separate and telling the same but different versions of the story, you have to get all that lore right, and Cogman was the guy. He was keeping track of it. He was saying, hey, this is what you can use for this character, and this is what you can reference. And even some of the stuff they created, there are brand new, created for the show only dragons revealed in this episode in the Viserys and Dorea bath scene. Cogman had, he'd be that kind of guy, something like that. But I love the story, reading about Cogman getting bumped up to writer for this one. David and Dan just kind of came to him and said, hey, and they were shooting, I think they were in post-production on the pilot, Cogman writes, and they came to him and said, do you mind just putting together this episode, write a treatment? You know these characters better than anyone. And there's a lot of lore in these episodes, a lot of references to things in the past. So he puts it all together, and they say, great, that's the episode. That's episode 4. And it works. And this is one of the more memorable episodes with some great scenes. Some added on after the show had been shot. They went back and kind of, we need to fill some time. The episode kind of came in a little short. And some great stuff. So Brian Cogman is the writer, cinematographer, Marco Pontecorvo, and editing, Francis Parker. They did episode 3 as well. One of the interesting notes about this episode is all the main cast was present. I believe, I didn't have that note in front of me, like 19 of the main cast, all in this episode. That hadn't happened before, and it doesn't happen often if it happens at all again. It's one of those things. This is truly an ensemble show with big stars. Certainly each season has leads, but this is an ensemble, and the ensemble is out to play in this episode. Let's dive in. What we do here on this show, Casterly Talk, formerly Daily Thrones, is really discuss the themes and lessons. Again, for those who've been following along, old news, but for new folks checking in, I just think it's important to really go back. If we're going to do a rewatch, let's look at this show and why we love it, because there's surface level things, and some of that is pretty people doing ugly things, and dragons, and magic, and castles, and swords, and all those things that, we just all kind of like. And none of that is wrong. But I really think for those that got pulled in by this show, and the books, but we're talking mostly about the show here, the general audience, the large amount of people that came into this story from the show, and none of us, and I'm one of them. I'd heard about the books, never read them until season 1 comes along, and now I'm in, and I have no shame in that. Don't let anyone ever shame you for that. We celebrate those that read the books from the beginning. Rachel Cushing is someone who fits into that category, and I celebrate those who still, even though they love the show, have yet to read the books, and maybe one day will. I do recommend it. It will definitely increase your knowledge of what's happening on the screen and your appreciation, and at times it will frustrate you. There was some news this week. I think we can't skip past that before we really dive into the episode. It's in the upcoming book that's kind of the inside story, the official inside story of the making of series. I'm really excited about that. I think James Hibbert of VW is the author on that one. And they've been releasing little blips from it to get you all excited. And they talked about, they had Benioff and Weiss talking about why they didn't include Lady Stoneheart. And that's one of the things that I'm always like, yeah, I still think I might want that. But I actually, they got a 3-point kind of plan, the reason why. That a lot of it is just, we knew things that were going to happen in the books related to Lady Stoneheart that they don't want to say even now in this interview, in this book, because the books aren't out. They don't want to spoil it. So we knew some things, and we knew we weren't going to go there with some of the characters that might be intertwined with Lady Stoneheart. So it'd be a big sea change. It'd be a problem right away, the butterfly effect and full effect there. And then two, and I forget who it was, Benioff or Weiss, says it pretty plainly, and I agree, like, that's one of the best scenes in the book. Like, when you get to that and the reveal of Lady Stoneheart, it's like you drop the book. You're like, unbelievable. Didn't see that coming. Wow. It's great. And that's why, again, if you're out there and you haven't read the books, take the time. It's work. It's work. You might have to take some notes, but it's work, and it's worth it. And that reveal is absolutely one of the things that makes reading the books so worth it. But I agree that if you know that you can't use the character the way maybe George is going to use the character, and that you have to do something dramatically different, then just wanting to see that reveal on screen isn't enough to do it for the story you're telling. This is why I've really lately been emphasizing that they are the same story told in different ways, and that's okay. We accept that more with our movies that are adaptations of books. Some people don't. I know some people are still very upset at Peter Jackson's Lord of the Rings. Hashtag Tom Bombadil for life. I get it. The elves don't show up at the Two Towers. I get it. I am a big Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy fan. I love the 2005 movie. Douglas Adams had a hand in it, but there's some changes. It's also more accurate than I think people give it credit for, but I'm protective. I'm such a fan of Robotech and the movie that they're always trying to get the movie version of Robotech out. I'm going to be first in line to watch it and first in line to be like, well, that didn't really, that didn't necessarily happen. That's not the story I am familiar with. It's just our nature. I am one of the people that does still think, gosh, if you could have pulled off Lady Stoneheart, what a reveal. But one of the reasons they said, in addition to the ones I talked about here, is they felt for their story that they had the ending they wanted for Catelyn Stark. They didn't want to take away from that. And also Michelle Fairley just put it all out in the Red Wedding, in her death scene, in the moment. And the reveal might have cheapened that. And I agree with that from a storytelling and producing standpoint. As a fan, no, I would have enjoyed it. 100%. I would not have, if Lady Stoneheart was revealed, I would not have been, well, I mean, that just totally undercuts the Red Wedding. No, I wouldn't, and I guarantee most people wouldn't. But from a writer, which I am, and understanding the production process and the producing process and the storytelling process, I can get behind that reason. The other reason is, again, they knew they knew that they were going to be resurrecting some folks. That Jon Snow being one of them. They knew Beric Dondarrion. There was going to be people dying and coming back to life, and maybe this was a bridge too far, one too many. Especially considering they didn't have the Jon Snow one was very needed. Dondarrion on a lesser level needed. So, for what it's worth, it's one of those asked and answered situations. They were asked, they have given their definitive answer, and I understand it. I agree for the most part. Still, probably would have wanted to see Lady Stoneheart, but again, that's one of those things that's great for the moment, but maybe not great for their story. And that's also, again, why we go into the themes, into the whys of Game of Thrones. So let's keep doing that here. We are going to take this dive into the big themes here of episode 4, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. And I got to say, of all the episodes so far, this might be just the simplest one to dive into. There's always a lot of layers, a lot of things, and you have to watch a scene and really kind of, well, what's the connection to the bigger theme? Hear me out here. I think that this just might be the theme for the entire series, that being Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. I think this is the show. This is the story. George R.R. Martin is always kind of interested in those. I mean, underdogs doesn't even cut it, but he's interested in what Tyrion says here. He has a tender heart for the Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. But this is why I think it works for the series. I think what this episode puts out is that it's everyone. And it's all of us. We put these labels to it. Bran is a cripple, and Tyrion will say, own that, that's what you are. I'm a dwarf, I own that, that's what I am. That's his moment in episode 1. Jon Snow, you're a bastard, at least you think you are. But it's the broken things that just really, when you really look at it, it's everyone in this series. It's everyone dealing with past trauma, truce, all that stuff, which is also, I think, one of the themes of this specific episode. Things that keep coming up time and time again, facing our truths and facing the truths. Trauma, Rachel and I talked about it, and yes, Rachel will be back. Andreas joining soon, Lon Harris joining soon, and other special guests. I always feel I over-apologize for just me being here, but schedule and budget-wise, it's just sometimes the way it works out, kids. But I definitely miss the inside of everyone else, especially Rachel, who's been just first 2 episodes just really digging into some great themes, especially as they relate to Dany and Sansa. So I think we've discussed before, there's a lot of trauma being dealt with and how you deal with it. And so it's going to come back up again, especially season 1. It's laying that groundwork. But I think it all, when you start even looking ahead in the series, and I think it all comes back to everyone on this show is in their own way a cripple, bastard, and broken thing. In their own way, a lot of it emotions there. And this episode has a lot of facing our truths. And going to that theme of this being a tale of broken things, I also think this episode puts kind of a fine point on the idea that this series is and again, part of George's writing is this is a series about the lords and ladies of high houses having to look down over their castle walls at those below. Now, do we spend a ton of time with the small folk? Do we sip bowls of brown with them down in Flea Bottom? We see them, we work through them. We are still dealing with those lords and ladies and kings and queens and princes and princesses, as Cersei would say. So don't get me wrong, but their actions affect those outside their walls, and then they are affected by them. I think of Daenerys Targaryen. I think of her in this episode. We'll touch on her a little bit. What she hears about the people over there, and George says it. I mean, I guess we can just dive into it now. Dany is saying, Illyrio has told Viserys, I've heard him say, I've been told, like they hang secret flags for Targaryens over there. They light candles for us. And, Jorah lays it online. It's one of the key sentences of the entire show. Jorah saying the common people pray for rain, health, and a summer that never ends. They don't care what games the High Lords play. They don't. But then it affects them. And I think it does in turn infect our stars, our lords and ladies, if you will. Using that in a general sense. Dany is affected by it. What she says right here in this episode, I hear tell. She's not saying it naively. I think she already has a hunch, just looking at Viserys. I don't know if they're going to be rooting for this guy. And even if they are, they might see him and maybe not want to root for him. She's not speaking out of a total naive spot when she talks to Jorah here. I've always taken that as her going, I hear this tale. I don't know about that. And Jorah kind of confirms it. And then what happens when she gets over there? There might be some people might be happy. She has some allies that she ends up working with. But there isn't this big, giant welcoming party. And I'm not just talking about Dragonstone. I'm talking about Westeros. There isn't this, great, the queen we've been secretly lighting candles for. We thought it'd be her brother. It's her. Doesn't matter. It's a Targaryen, and we're happy. She brought her Dothraki horde. They're great. Welcome them. So what Jorah's saying is very true. And I still think that fuels back into this idea that this is the lords and ladies of those high houses having to look over their castle walls. Definitely would have helped Joffrey in the season 2 flea bottom riots there. So from there, let's go into this idea of what keeps popping up in this episode. And this is what I love, and I'll always say this, and I want everyone, especially if you're relatively new to this rewatch. I'm not speaking from a point of being an expert on everything going on in here. I'm speaking of someone who just loves watching these episodes and finding the connective thread in each individual episode. And when you do that, when you start engaging with what's been put on the screen for you there, these themes do start coming up. And sometimes they just come up naturally. It's just the flow of the story. Sometimes it's very intentional by the creators. But a lot of times the actors are making choices. The writers are making choices. The directors, the editors. Editing, very important in how to tell these stories. They're making the choices that fuel us. And one that just kept coming up, this idea of if the series is truly about cripples, bastards, and broken things, focusing on broken things, a lot of it comes from, again, this facing the truth, facing who you are. And the first one, in a little bit later, as always, we'll get into some of those moments that mean more. Now that we have the whole story behind us. I love those, big and small. But I right from the start, Theon and Tyrion discussing. Theon, who knows his truth. He knows the truth and maybe doesn't want that to be the truth, as I think we learn later on. He is a Greyjoy. He doesn't feel he's a Stark. We got the great tragic speech to Ramsay as they go back into the castle, I was going to say the sewage, but I guess technically might have been. But down beneath the castle, later on in the show, we got that great speech about Ned Stark was his real father in his eyes, in his heart, and his soul, and how he deals with Jon later on, and the stuff in season 8 and his big finish, and the horrible things he experiences and the horrible things he does. I think a lot of that comes from Tyrion knowing his truth, but not wanting to face it. And I love the scene between him and Tyrion. And Tyrion, who has just said he has a tender heart for these cripples, bastards, and broken things. But when Theon comes at him real hard, Tyrion's got some truth. You're going to need to face it. Stupid rebellion then. I actually really love that moment. Love everything in there. Viserys is another character that does not want to face the truth of his situation. He's a horrible character. Harry Lloyd does such a great job. He's so you just want it. He's a little bitch. I'm just gonna say it. Viserys is that. In this episode, he's really doubling down because he's losing control. Go back to episode 1. He's a prick there. He's a prick to the end. But episode 1, he's got control. He's got questions. I'm a king. Illyrio does a great job kissing his ass to manipulate him and keep him in control as far as part of the Targaryen restoration plan there, right? But he slowly starts to see it. He slowly starts to face his own truth. He is a broken thing too, and he does not want to face it. He can't face it. How could he? He has no power. His concept of power, his inability to recognize Dothraki as people. The constant use of savages and Dany just saying, no, you can't do it. And saying, I am of these people now. I am one of them now. Again, is that 100% true? I don't know. Maybe not. But at this point, she's doing her best. I think it's a good faith effort on Dany to connect with her people, as it were. She is their Khaleesi, and she believes in it, and she's starting to face her truth, and we start to see that later. But Viserys does not want to face it, and as Daenerys starts to understand her destiny, embrace it, Viserys going to the Dorea bathtub scene. We're going to have a little bit more. We got some calls from all of you coming here in the second half of the show. That bathtub scene with Dorea is a spectacular scene. It's one of Cogman's finest. It is an add-on scene. They shot that after the episode was complete. But I love Viserys in that scene because he is speaking with this romantic, lore-filled view of the Targaryen dynasty. And I'm not one that's over here thinking the Targaryens are, quote, all bad. Aegon's conquest is an interesting thing to read about for me. Fire and Blood is so great because it deals with it. Really, the best thing about that Fire and Blood book. There's a lot of things I love about the Fire and Blood book. Here, it's a book we love it here at Casterly Talk in general. It's just the idea that Aegon's conquest, he conquers, and then immediately there's kind of peace in the realm. It's interesting to study, and Dorne doesn't bow, and all those things, and there's great plot points to read and learn about, but I've always found that interesting that Aegon, the realm is calm after that. Maegor is the one who kind of really upsets that, and that's the flipping of the coin with the Targaryens, as we know. But Viserys is sitting here he can't face that. He cannot face that the Targaryen dynasty might have been filled with some great feats and some great big dragons, but also filled with some horrible actions and some horrible things. And it's quite possible that the people don't want him back there. He can't face it, and it destroys him. And he's jealous of those who have the power around him, jealous of those that are loved. What gets him in the end over Dany? It isn't. I think it begins with him that it's her ascending to power that he doesn't have, power that he wants. I think of when I look at Viserys, I think of Tywin all the time, of a man who says has to say he's king is no king at all. I mean, Viserys that's every other word. I am the king. Well, I'm the dragon. Very clearly, he isn't. But I think it's the adoration. I think it's the acceptance. It's not just the title and the power, the perceived power that Dany has. When it finally, in the end, I mean, she rises up with him here. He is frightened here. Comes in strong, leaves crying and sniveling and weak. But I think some of it's the adoration. And it's not adoration that Dany craved. I think of anything, especially early on, it's adoration that Dany earns. But that's what gets him, and that's part of the truth Viserys can't face. And I think it goes a lot in the bathtub scene here with Dorea. We'll come back to that there. Jorah is in there having to face the truth. We see it again, the selling the slaves. And I look, for what it's worth, I love Jorah. As you all know, that's a broken record on my end, but I love this telling the story at a very very expensive wife. Where is she now? In another land with another man. Poor Jorah. Play those violins. I love him, man. I absolutely love him. He brings it again. I love this, especially if you can go back to the time when you're watching this show for the first time by yourself or with friends and loved ones, and you haven't read the books yet, and you're playing with these characters in your mind. Who am I rooting for? Who do I like? And things by episode 4, things are starting to. I think I hate that character, but something I like about that character. Jorah, you kind of immediately like. I don't know a lot of people who don't like Jorah. At worst, they just maybe not my favorite person. But I've never met a ton of people actively rooting against Jorah. As a Stannis fan, I can assure you there are people actively rooting against Stannis. This I guarantee happens. Jorah a little less. He does some things that are wrong. Times you're a little creepily obsessed with Dany. I fully admit that, even though I'm a big Jorah fan. But I think overall you're rooting for this guy. And Ian Glenn just brings a heart to him there. But you're also rooting for Ned Stark. And to hear these guys early on, I love going back to this and seeing just like, yeah, Ned Stark wants me dead. Looking at the audience, like that guy y'all rooting for in the other land that you all like, Sean Bean, he wants me dead. What do you think about him now? I like that kind of stuff there. And when I talk about facing the truth, in the case of like Viserys, it's like having to really, really be honest with yourself about what your past is, your truth is, what your trauma is, whatever it is. And with Jorah, he's so hard on himself that he holds on to his sins, the stuff he says in the previous episode about his father, about my father's a great man, and I betrayed him. He's always lashing himself there, Jorah, and I think it's him. It's about he needs to face the truth of the situation, that he maybe did something wrong, technically wrong, rule of law, even more than the spirit of law, but he doesn't let himself off. He doesn't forgive himself, and that dominates. He can't face that truth. So I think that. Then we go to other just examples of truth, facing it. We get. I'm going to jump here a little bit here to some of the other ones, and we'll come back to Jon Snow. Sansa and Arya have similar things presented to them in this episode. And both eventually, I mean, Sansa right here is just very mad at Ned. Arya isn't, but I think later on it factors in some frustrations and some of their great conversations. But both of them are faced with, they're not faced with their truth as is, oh, this is, I have to deal with this. This is who I am, emotional stuff. They are both presented, first by Sansa and Septa Mordain. And then the really engaging, charming scene with Ned and Arya's doing the practicing the balance, and tomorrow she's going to chase cats, and her dancing lessons are going great. Both of them are presented with this, what I'll say is potential truth, and the truth of how the world views them. Sansa, you're going to marry the king, and I know he's not been, the prince hasn't been great to you, but you're going to marry the prince, you become a queen to him, and you're going to give him a bunch of beautiful children. They better be boys, but, oh, don't worry. And Sansa keeps, what if they're girls? What Jane Poole's mom has 5 girls. What if they do that? Everyone will hate me. This is my duty. I'm supposed to give the king a prince. And she's faced with something that she wanted. And this is Sansa right away, episode 4, and it's already happened. But Sansa's dreams, the ones she wanted, going back to her, or just when we first meet her, and everything going on in the pilot, Sansa's already, she's got horrible things coming her way. We know that, and it's tragic. It's hard to watch. But go back to this moment. She is faced with a particular set of truths, potential truths, for this is what is expected for you. You are to go this way. And she's not yet ready or strong enough to say no. But I take solace in the fact that for all the horrible things that happened to her, she doesn't go that way. She forms a new path. She becomes the Queen of the North. And go back to this scene. Go back to her and Septa Mordain staring up at the throne. And the Septa, who's I really like the character. What she ends up doing for Sansa in the end is pretty powerful act. But here she is, just tell this is the way it is. You're going to say, oh, don't worry, beautiful children, everything's going to be great. He's not great, but this is your duty. This is also what you want, and this is what me as your Septa have probably helped kind of counsel and train you on. Part of my duty. Get you ready for this. Get you ready to go to court. And Sansa, because that's something she knows or at least thinks she wants, she's not ready to fight against it. She's not there yet, and it's a long journey to get there. But I love this scene. It's a truth dropped in front of her that she slowly starts to realize, and then pretty powerfully, she doesn't want. She doesn't want that one. She might want the throne. She might want a throne. She doesn't want to sit next to it. She wants to sit on it. She wants to be in control of some of her choices in her destiny. And I think it's pretty powerful. This scene is an underrated scene to watch when you go back. Same thing. You got Arya. Arya's plain and simple. I mean, and we're going to come back to a little bit in the things that mean something more now, especially as it relates to Nymeria. But she's presented with a truth or a potential truth or what people consider should be her truth going forward. It's not about the past, it's about going forward with Sansa and Arya here. But like, oh yeah, no, you're gonna marry a little prince, and you're gonna have some kids too, and you're gonna, you'll run the hold fast while he rules it. Don't worry, it's all gonna be good. And then you can't fault Ned here. You can't fault Ned. But in fact, I want to give Ned credit because he does hire Syrio Forel. He does see it. And he doesn't react. We don't see the scene play out. It ends. But when she says pretty plainly, no, that's not me, he smiles. She'll learn. She'll learn. But also in Ned's eyes, Sean Bean's choices here, it's like I don't see him fighting against it. I think there's some traditions that he thinks that just won't be changed. He didn't have that foresight. But in a way, I think Ned believes her in this scene. And it's a good scene for her. Talking about the truth and traumas. It's all here. We got the Jon Snow stuff now here. Some of the best stuff of season 1 was Jon kind of learning his way at the Wall. It's great to go back and watch now. It's just even more powerful to me. Jon, too, has a tender spot in his heart for those cripples, bastards, and broken things. And we get one of the most broken things presented to him, where John Bradley as Samwell Tarly shows up. And this is John Bradley's first major role, just come out of, I think, acting school, slays it in the audition with the scene of him telling John about his father back at Horn Hill. And now, again, jump ahead when you got Randall Tarly, Dickon Tarly, to know what Sam went through, to hear this story now, and now to have a face and a voice, a menacing, mean voice to the story as Samwell Tarly's telling John the story. Great stuff. And John Bradley, just a great performer, just kills it as Sam, and it's needed. And it's needed. We need to really not just root for Sam, and not have empathy for Sam, but I think one of the things in this episode, one of the themes, and even maybe more of a lesson for me that I take from this in these sequences with John and Sir Alistair Thorne is not just root and have empathy and sympathy for Sam, but want him to get better and want him to grow, and not want him just to stay in this protective bubble that John's now forming around him. And I think John starts from a real good point, as John does. Seeing the truth of Sam, seeing what's there in front of him, and knowing he needs help. Needs help. But it comes in a little bit later. Second half of the show, we'll talk about Sir Alistair Thorne and why I love Sir Alistair Thorne. As tough as that may be. And I think he gets probably what's deserved in the end. But I understand him, and I really love Alistair Thorne as a character in the show. Good in the books too, but he pops in the show. And this episode is where it starts. Well, this is the episode where I was just like, I like this guy. But it's about John learning some of that stuff there too. We've got a lot of trauma too. Talking about Ned's detective work is in. Actually, I'm going to go back to John and Sam here. I think one of the things, if this is a series of cripples, bastards, and broken things, if this is what that show is about, and it's all of us are broken in some way, I do think this show, if you want it, I don't know if it's not on a banner headline on the show, but I think if you want it, you can look past and ask yourself the question, look past the surface and ask yourself the question, can we grow past our traumas? Every one of these characters, especially here in this first part of the season, we keep talking about that. We talked a lot about trauma in the previous 3 episodes. Trauma is real. Trauma is not to be ignored. It's not to be downplayed. It is to be worked through and dealt with. I believe this may be a personal opinion. I don't like to swim in it. I'm a depressive person. Been in therapy for that. I do not like to swim in it, though it's sometimes impossible to. But how do I choose to work through it? How do I fight through it? And sometimes it's a fight. And every one of these characters in the show has something that I think they need to fight through. And I love this moment. John and Sam on the top of the wall. Sam, with his blinking eyes up there, comes there and he knows he has an ally in John. And this is where I think this comes after the great scene, right? I'm trying to check my notes. Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. I can't remember. But we got the Sir Alistair Thorne speech going on here. So maybe it is after. I can't remember. I just watched it literally 20 minutes before I recorded this, and I can't remember. So many things to watch and take notes on. But anyways, at the top of the wall, when Sam, I think he gets up there and he knows he has an ally and friend in Jon, and so there he can let the guard down. He tells him the story, all that kind of stuff. We know that, but I think there's something. He gets to the top of the wall and he just kind of says, I can't see good, and this is who I am. And I love. I think this is more powerful than I think even I gave it credit for in the first 50 rewatches. When Jon turns to Sam and says, "You can't fight, you can't see, you're afraid of heights and almost everything else, probably. What are you doing here, Sam?" Now, we know why Sam's there. We know the what and the hows of that. But this is a why. I love the whys. And Sam has to figure that out. Jon has to figure that out for himself. What are you doing here? And I don't mean this to sound harsh, but Samwell Tarly tells a pretty horrible, horrific story, especially now that we've seen Randall Tarly in action later on in the series. Jon's been through some bad stuff here. Excuse me, John Bradley, Samwell Tarly. And it's all true and it's all valid. But I still think the question you have to ask yourself, and the question he gets asked, great, what are you doing here? And how do you go forward? That's a truth. How do you take that forward? That's a trauma. How do you take that forward? And it is not easy. I'm not suggesting that on the show or that in real life is easy. Absolutely not. But these are tales. These are myths. These are stories full of lessons. Stories full of characters that make mistakes, that we learn from those mistakes. These are stories of things done to characters that they did not deserve. And they cannot help. And what do we take from that? What do we learn from that? I think that's why we keep coming back. We want Sam to get better. We want Sam to answer this question, what are you doing here, Sam? Do I keep saying Jon or Sam? Jon Bradley's so damn good, I consider him Samwell Tarly in real life, too. What are you doing here, Sam? And what are all of us doing here? And what are all these characters doing here? And sometimes those characters answer incorrectly and creates great television. But that's what this episode really put forth for me. What are we doing here? What was and what could be, and that never has to remain the same. When I keep saying we're rooting for Sam, number one, but I think we're rooting for him to grow and get stronger, but not a classic sense. Look, he ends up getting a big kill, right? He kills a White Walker. Put that on his back of his baseball card. But that's not an act of strength. It's not just a simple kill. It's why he does that. It's who he does it for. And where he finds that courage in that situation, where he clearly is afraid. That's the stuff we want to root for in Sam. And that's when he shows up here, you immediately feel sorry for him. But now I want to push him forward. And we'll come back to that stuff with Alistair Thorne. I was starting to go into the Ned thing, too. Ned's detective work, as I said up top, really kicks up here in this episode. And this is something that has pulled many, many people into the series. I can't tell you how many times I've talked to people, some who I've been on shows with, who are like, dragons, magic, whatever. I'm here for the politics and the intrigue and the character work. And I think that's probably why some people were pulled in, and then maybe as the show got more magic and got more big and epic and it didn't have this time for the smaller scenes, I could see that being a factor in some people liking the show less. And I don't disagree. I understand. I as much as I love the later seasons and I love episode 8 or season 8, I do wish we had more of the quiet moments we get in season 1. I do, but it's just also where the story went and as big as the show got. Worse. And that's just the way it is. But we have these scenes to dig into. And Ned's detective work, and I'm speaking from personal experience, Ned's detective work absolutely is what I spent every, Monday through Saturday through Sunday afternoon wondering what's Ned going to discover from this episode on. I'm to the end, to Ned's bitter end, and I still didn't believe it. I thought Ned was going to survive that beheading, and Arya was going to save him, and the whole world and realm would know that Joffrey is who he really is. I just, and then and you start to realize, if you're looking for justice, you've come to the wrong place with Game of Thrones. So I love, though, just kind of diving into the why of Ned's search. We keep coming back to the show because of Ned's detective work and the book and the clues. But honestly, I don't think just because of hindsight. But I mean, we're pretty clued into what the truth is as viewers right from the beginning. Even if it's not expressly stated, we get the sense. So a lot of the things Ned is picking up, we're like, yeah. Joffrey is Cersei and Jaime's son, right? Like, so it's about the why of the search. And I do believe there's a lot of Ned's search, his detective work, is a search for the truth no one wants to face. Robert's trauma, we keep talking about Robert Baratheon. I believe he knew in his heart Lyanna Stark loved Rhaegar. The answer of a lot of things is in front of Robert, including, I think he has to realize, I think he's just numb with alcohol. I think he has to realize something ain't on the up and up with Cersei, Jaime, and his kids. To me, it's impossible to think at one point he didn't question it. Maybe at one point he accepted it. I'm not saying he was denying it, or it's just like Ned's search is about that. It's like, this was right in front of you because Robert knew about the bastards. Not necessarily Gendry, but he, and this might be a little bit more on the book side, but, he had an idea. Ned's detective work takes him to Baelish, the great Baelish scene. We'll come back to that as a quote. Baelish is saying the truth. He's saying a lot of truths. No one wants to face it. Ned even at times. Sir Hugh with a veil. He knows his truth. I'm a knight in name only. I'm going to bluster and puff out my chest until everyone else believes that I'm actually a knight. But I know I'm not. I'm scared. And look what happens to him. He pretends to be something else, and it costs him. A lot of that has to do with Gregor, but I don't want to totally hate on Sir Hugh. He's so great in the one moment. Well, I am a knight. I just so happen to be a knight. You're going to get yours. Gendry's truth. Does he know all the truth? No, he doesn't know the big reveal, but he's going to face it. And Robert and him, Ned and him having the interaction. Again, not that Gendry's like, Jon Arryn kept coming around. Now this Hand of the King coming around. I wonder what's going on. No, but he's got a truth in front of him, and he's got to have to face too, and it takes a while to get him there. And there's a lot more. Ned's detective work takes him to a lot of places. We have a great scene with Cersei. Another theme to explore a little bit later on. So that's some of the big stuff there. We also learn of the truth of Sandor and Gregor. Now, it's a different method than the books to get the history. In the book, I do believe Sandor is the one telling Sansa his own history. But I like this better. I will say I like this plot device, this trick a little bit better. Baelish, number one, you set some Baelish just knows, like, how does Baelish know that? He and Varys, their little war of whispers. I love that. So that it just kind of helps that. But I really like this idea better. It just works for me that I don't think Sandor, when he finally reveals some of his truths and his past traumas to Arya, it's much more powerful than getting it in this episode or in season 1. If he was to tell Sansa at all, like, here's what's going on with me. I like this better, and it just really sets it up. And it is, again, the truth and facing it. And how do you work past trauma? And it takes Sandor a long time, understandably. I don't want anyone to misunderstand me when I'm talking about traumas. And it's a very real-world conversation. But how you get through them, or how you work past them, or how you deal with them, or knowing that they won't leave. They don't leave. Sandor's scars will never leave. This is always going to be there. What's he going to do with it? It's also interesting to note Sandor several times. Well, if you accidentally call him a sir or a knight, he will correct you very fast and very angrily. And I think it's interesting to note that Baelish says the toy he was playing with was a wooden knight. Sandor probably holding that wooden knight, dreaming like every other boy in the realm of being a strong, proud, noble knight. And it was that moment that gave him the scars that ruined his life, that dominated his life. An interesting little detail that I think can sometimes be slip past all of us. So there you go. I also love to, Jon Snow goes into his past when talking with Samwell Tarly about have they ever been with women. Fun scene, charming scene, but in there you got Jon really kind of speaking some heartfelt stuff about who his mother is and he doesn't know, and it's heartbreaking, especially, with the knowledge we have now and probably even the knowledge we started gathering as the show went on. But also, a side note in the scene, he talks about Roz being the sex worker in Westeros that he went to see. And Theon talks about her. We've seen her with Tyrion. And Roz, Esme Bianco is the actor who plays her. It was supposed to be, as we all know, it was supposed to be like a one-off character, one episode. They bring her back. But I love the mentions. I love her just being all around. But poor Roz, that ending, so brutal. But the things she knows. The things Roz knows. If she could only write a book. So there you go. That's some of the big themes and lessons in episode 4, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. But we're not done talking about it. We are going to take a quick break here on the podcast side. And during the break, while I switch some files around on YouTube, we'll do some bonus discussions. I also need a drink of water. My lips are sticking together, friends. This is Casterly Talk. We're looking back at episode 4, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. We'll see you on the other side. All right, those watching on YouTube, not live. This is a taped. I always do this on the live shows, so I know on the tape shows it might be even more on for you. But this is, first and foremost, an audio recording that just happens to be on video. So I am working through that aspect of it as I try to switch these files and have fun doing that while you chat. So this episode, like I said before, is it really changed the game for me when watching it. The first time around. Again, I was discovering the story as it played out in front of me, and this is the one that I was pulled in right from the beginning. But you spend episode 1 and 2 kind of learning the lay of the land. Episode 3 stuff starts happening, particularly around Jaime Lannister, about the first kill and everything, where you start to see things in a different light. But it's really this episode where you're pulled in by Ned, and you're starting to learn these truths of these characters. And Sandor, that's why I think I highlight the Sandor one, because right away you have a pretty strong opinion of the Hound, especially after what he does to Micah the Butcher's boy. Kills him. Not good. And there's nothing about him you kind of like. But if you go back now, even now, the way he and Tyrion, there were some of their interactions, there's definitely not a niceness to Sandor, but there's something else at play there. It's you can see now, looking back. Back then, I had no idea. I was like, I'm going to hate this guy. I like Rory McCann. Yarp, it's great. But I'm going to like this guy. But here, just learning that story. And then a little bit later on, and was it probably episode 5, where he and Gregor have the confrontation. The first one. Like, that just changed the right way. So this is the episode that I think really started pulling me. Not in. I was already in, but deeper. Just deeper. And there you go. Cogman doing that. So good stuff, Brian Cogman. We are going to come back here on the podcast side and continue looking at episode 4. Welcome back to Casterly Talk. I'm Ken Napzok, just by myself this week. Looking back at episode 4 of Game of Thrones, season 1, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. Thank you so much for coming along for the ride. All right, we are going to start in the second half of the show here. We are going to take a look at some important foreshadowing, things with more meaning, some favorite moments. We got some calls from you out there via the Anchor app. Important foreshadowing, things with more meaning. Bran dreaming about the three-eyed raven. Great beginning to the show. It is one of the first times. Again, we're early on. We're season 1. You got the chilling at the end of episode 2, King's Road. Ladies killed. That's not great. But then Bran's eyes popping open. Still gives me chills. And this pulled me in even another way. Like, because we literally had no idea. We had no idea. Again, book readers were over there going, oh, I know what this means. God bless you. I was like that. By season 4, I was the one going, oh, I know what this means. Back here, it just, what was going on? And old Nan wakes him up. Little Lord's been dreaming. Like, oh, okay, he's dreaming. But what is the dream? It's fun to watch this now. It's foreshadowing. It means more now. But back then, and even like, if you're doing a rewatch in season 3, you have less idea. You think you know what this means. Just where it ends up. It's fascinating to me. Things that mean more now. Theon and Bran, they have this little interaction at the beginning. Theon's, he's being Theon, chest pumping Theon at the beginning. But this scene, I love it. And watching it this time around made me value Theon's death even more and the full circle nature of that. Theon's already got a lot of scenes by this point in the show, but this is his first meaty stuff, the scene with him and Tyrion. And now this moment, it plays off 8 seasons later, but the connection there between he and Bran and the choices Theon makes in the end, I value it a lot more now. Hodor walks in, says Hodor for the first time about Bran. Oh, tug on my heartstrings. That's horrible. Seeing Vice Dothrak and knowing what becomes of that and how it's key to Dany at many different times of her life, I thought that was interesting. The conversation she's having with Jorah about the Dothraki had never crossed the Narrow Sea. And Jorah, he comes across... Well, no, I take it back. We know Jorah doesn't come across with her. He ends up meeting up with her again. And this is, to me, means more now just as what his advice and how it's taken from her is valuable. And when she loses that is one of the pillars pulled out from underneath her. And this conversation, Robert is foolish enough to meet them in open battle. Though we have other dialogue and scenes in season 1 that show you Robert understands a Dothraki horde would be very tough to meet in open battle. But Jorah's right in a sense. Robert loves a good fight. But those around him would counsel him better. So there's some good stuff here that just kind of means more now when you know what happens. Let's go into the Doreah in the bathtub scene, or as I call it, the bathtub scene of history. It's some of the best foreshadowing around. Like, it's got like a roll call of things big and small, right? The dragons, the names of the dragons, some made up for the show, some from the books. She talks about faceless men, a man that can change his face like other men change clothes, a man with a dragon glass dagger. And what that could be. Could it be, well, I was going to say Baelish, but that's a Valyrian still dagger. Could she have been confused? No, I don't think it's specific. I don't like to really apply specifics to this kind of stuff, but just the mention of a dragon glass dagger seemed like nothing. Again, read the books, God bless you if you're ahead. But if you're watching and we're analyzing the show, this is all these are mentions that you just go like, hey, cool, the world building. Then you go back to this bathtub scene a lot. Roxanne McKee's so great. Ari Lloyd's great too, but it just, can you feel for her, because Viserys talks down to her. Oh, you've been 15 years in a whorehouse. You've never even seen the sky. She's like, F you, man. This is what I've seen. I've seen the world, and she's seen everything she describes as stuff that comes into play later on. A faceless man with a dragon glass. We're going to need that dragon glass. She talks about a pirate wearing his weight in gold and colorful silk sails. I think a lot of people take that as Salador San. A great character, factors in small, I would say, but I love Salador San, but I think that's theirs too. And then Doreah talking about her own love of dragons and how that will be her downfall and what that means and how that affects Daenerys. If they don't, I don't know. If we'll get to that in season 2, but there's a little bit of some kind of in-story butterfly effect. Doreah's love of dragons, and then dragons emerge. We see her season 2 in Karth, just trying to learn to feed them and get them to, she's doting over them, and who doesn't love a cute little dragon? And then she helps get some she helps steal them and sends Dany to the House of the Undying, where Dany has a vision of things to come, and I think taps into higher power, and the dragons themselves tap into their higher skills and abilities and powers, and a lot of that comes from Dorea loving dragons, if you follow me down that path. So anyways, love this scene. It was, again, written after the episode came up a little short. This scene and the Jory Cassell and Jaime Lannister scene, they went back and not reshoots. They just went back, reshoots for the overall episode, but not for these scenes. They added these scenes, and I think that's interesting. When the plan is not, even if a plan's in place, you're going to go eventually find that you might need to go toss some other stuff in there, and these scenes come out of that, and that's great. We talked a lot about Sansa and Arya. I think those scenes, they're in the big lessons and the big themes of this episode, but just go back and watch them just on the surface, just knowing what happens with those two characters and these two scenes, Sansa hearing about what she'll become and knowing that really none of that is true, and her path ends up so much better, though with a lot of horrible things in the way, as we know. I like that a lot. On Arya, no, that's not me. And just when she uses that again to Nymeria, that heartbreaking scene with Nymeria, but a powerful scene later on. We got some great quotes coming up here, but we also got the first mention of Thoros of Myr. I love Rast and Ghost during that scene where they kind of intimidate Rast into not hurting Samwell Tarly, and knowing where Rast ends up with dire wolves. I talked about Roz, just poor Roz. She's seen it all, but poor Roz. I love anytime I see that Catspot dagger, anytime I see that Valyrian steel dagger, and I always yell at the screen, that saves us all. It always has more meaning. Bronn shows up. That has a lot of meaning. Jerome Flynn shows up. He's smart right from the beginning. Pay me to take my room, sleep in it. I'll sleep out in the barn with the gold you're going to give me. Bronn shows up. Favorite moments, lines, and scenes. This is a little one. We're going to get into some bigger stuff, but there's I love in the Castle Black scenes when they're out in the courtyard training, and Alistair Thorne and Jon Snow are going at each other with words. I always check the extras in the background. I got no problems with extras, but sometimes I don't know what it's just watch it. The quote unquote sword fighting training that's going on by the extras in Castle Black. It's clink, 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 clink. It's the worst, but therefore the best. I'm like, are they going to be Rangers with that? Alistair Thorne should turn around and maybe yell at them. At least Gren and Pip and Rast, even though they're getting their ass kicked by Jon, they're fighting. And we know what Jon's capable of. But turn around. You might have some problems elsewhere, Alistair. I love, in one of the small council meetings where Ned says, I'm sure the tourney puts many a coin in pockets. Might be paraphrasing a little bit. And there's a great cutaway shot to Baelish, because Baelish has just basically said, the whores, are walking bow-legged in town with the tourney. And Ned says, I'm sure the tourney puts many a coin in pockets. And there's a cut to Baelish, and he goes, mm-hmm. It's an unintentional comedy moment, maybe even intentional. It's great. I love the other add-on scene, Jaime and Jory Cassell having a great conversation. It's just one of my low-key favorite moments in the show. It says a lot about Jaime and who he's trying to be, who he feels he needs to be, and the stuff he's working through, because he's guarding Robert, while Robert, fools around with 3 or 4 women, one who smells like blackberry jam. That's one of the greatest quotes of the show, I guess, for me. And he's dealing with that. And then he keeps this up. And Jory, Jory poor Jory going through, and poor Jory for what happens to him. But Jory, every time he's going around, hi, I'm just got to give you this message. You're going to treat me bad too. Thanks. Great. There's Jaime. But he's kind of like, hey, I like that Jory's like, hey. We met before. Not only we met, we fought next to each other. In this increasingly fascinating journey of Jaime Lannister, we've had one of the biggest moments already with him talking about his first kill and then what the Mad King says. That's one of my favorite scenes, but that's why I called this one of just kind of my low-key favorite scenes of the show. I love that Jaime suddenly is like, oh, you were at the Siege of Pike? Guard comes down. Yeah, that was a fight, man. Oh, those Greyjoys, they do enjoy their violence. Oh, yeah. And talking about Thor Samir, that's where we get our first mention of Thor Samir and the Flaming Sword. It's like, not that Jaime wouldn't, but I just like seeing Jaime kind of like feel like, oh, yeah. And I know he feels that's he's supposed to be that knight, and that's him talking about kills and knights doing knight things, even though Jory's not a knight. I don't know. There's just some humanity to Jaime in this moment, and that you want it, and then he turns on Jory. There's just something intriguing about it, Jaime, in this moment, and all these moments in season 1, where he starts unveiling and peeling back the layers. We also get Catelyn's. We also get Ned and Cersei having the scene. Anytime they have a scene, we could spend a lot of time. I don't want to spend too much time on it here. Today we're gonna have a lot more moments with Ned and Cersei, but I just love any time they're together as performers, as characters. It's great stuff. And a couple moments here. We do get. Let's not Baelish saying. I'm going to talk about it in the quotes, but Baelish and Ned having the great scene, and Baelish again going to me some of the truths about. Here, let me tell you the truth. You know, you face the truth of King's Landing. You kind of have the hunch, Ned, and you're being stubborn and you're sticking to it. You don't want to play the game, but that's a spy. That's a spy. That's my spy. I actually love that scene, and it says a lot about what's going on in Ned's mind and heart and the world around him that's troubling to him. And I understand it. He's not wrong. We end the episode with Catelyn Stark and the action that launches a war. We also got Sir Alistair Thorne's speech. I want to talk about these two moments. Let's go to Sir Alistair Thorne. I really do legitimately love this character. I love Alistair Thorne. He is complicated to love. Probably less than my guy Stannis. But he is a crusty old guy that I love because I'm a crusty old guy myself too. I have a lot of personal experiences in different kind of leadership roles, and I have some takes on how to do it and how to do it wrong because I've done it wrong, and how to do it right because I feel sometimes I've done it right. Sir Alistair Thorne overall, I'd say, does things the way he's supposed to, but I would also say he does things wrong. And there's a lot of play going back up to Jon, the arrival of Samwell Tarly. And what I talk about, what I mean about we are to have sympathy and empathy and root, and we're supposed to root for Samwell Tarly. And John Bradley's performance right from the get-go makes that possible. But I think it would be a disservice to Samwell Tarly and to those in our lives to stop at that point. You got a lot of, dealt some bad cards. Good, I'm going to protect you and help you. That's good, but don't stop there, if possible. And again, I hate sometimes making these real-world connections because it's not, I'm speaking in generalities, and there's some things that are, the real world's the real world. But follow me here. I think in this episode, Jon starts to learn it's not good enough just to protect Sam and Gren and Pip. They have to get better. I always go to a great scene and sequence in the movie Glory from 1989. Ed Zwick directs, Denzel Washington, Matthew Broderick, Carrie Elwes in the Civil War, Morgan Freeman in the Civil War story, Andre Braugher. Great, one of my all-time favorite movies. But there's a scene where Carrie Elwes is teaching the men to shoot, and they're fun, they're laughing, and they're bonding. And you're like, oh, everyone's bonding. The 54th is going to get together. Everyone's going to on the same team. But Matthew Broderick knows what will happen when they get on the battlefield. He's been there. He's seen heads blown off. He's seen legs chopped off. He's been there. And so it's a real kind of tough moment. And he's kind of being an a-hole, Matthew Broderick. He's Colonel Robert Shaw. And he's shooting they're trying to get the guy to load fast, and he's shooting the pistol in his head, boom, 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 and then the guy kind of breaks, boom. And Matthew Broderick turns to Gary Elwes and says, teach them right, Captain. Is it Captain or Major? Maybe it's Major. Teach them right. That's the point, though. It's been a while since I watched that movie. But that's the point. Teach them right. Connect with them. Bond with them. Love them. Be one with them. We all are going to grow together, but we need to grow. And you must teach them right. and must prepare them for what's to come, as brutal as that may be. That, to me, is Alistair Thorne in this moment. When he confronts Jon and Sam, and they're in the kitchen scene, and they're being friends, and they're talking about not being with women, and Alistair Thorne walks in. We always talk about episode stars here. Owen Teale as Sir Alistair Thorne. A lot of stage time. In New York, Broadway, that kind of stuff. He kills it. And I love him for it, and this is why I love the character. It's this moment. Now, he goes on, he's telling some truths. We talk about facing truths. This episode, the theme's facing truths, and we're all cripples, bastards, and broken things, but you must face that trauma, you must face that truth and decide where to go with it. It's a harsh lesson, and I don't, some people might not agree with me on this, but this is a leadership lesson. Everything Alistair Thorne says in this speech here, to me, is true. He does go into the story of eating the horses and eating the men, and he takes some shots at Sam and his weight. Again, I think Alistair Thorne does some things wrong, even though Jorah Mormont understands too. I need him to be this way. I need to trade him right. But even down to the line where Alistair Thorne says, you're going to take the vows, and they're going to call you men of the Night's Watch, but you'll be fools to believe it. You're boys. That's harsh. That's an insult, but it's not wrong. Nothing he's saying is wrong. Benjen would agree. I don't think Benjen would deliver the message in the same way. But look at what we've seen of Benjen Stark in communicating with Tyrion and who he is. Benjen's not a happy-go-lucky guy. He's seen some things. The mistake, though, is Alistair Thorne's heart is hard. There's a hardening of the heart. And often people with these experiences that they know are very real, and that they know that other people who might criticize them haven't experienced it. They know that even though you might say your ways are wrong, and you're like, I know my ways, there's a reason for them. But I think Sir Alistair Thorne has hardened his heart, and he has failed as a leader in this side. I think he succeeds as a leader. I've talked often on Casterly Talk. His speech to Jon Snow at the Watchers of the Wall episode in season 4 about leadership, about true leadership, I would put that on a wall because it's true. And stuff Alistair Thorne says in this speech are true. But Jon, in this moment, Jon faces the truth. I think he faces it when he asks Sam, why are you here, Sam? This is kind of my point. He has this kind of knowledge. He knows that Thorne is not wrong. That when they all go north of the wall, as Thorne says, you don't know cold. He's not lying. And he's not just talking about the cold. I think Jon does it right, and down the line does it right. What makes him a great leader at times, a leader, though, with mistakes. Jon is a flawed character, too. He always stays on the side of good. He's one of the purest characters in all of Game of Thrones. But I think he makes mistakes along the way, too. And I'm glad he does. Otherwise, he wouldn't be too interesting. But I think he takes this. I think he can look at Sam and have sympathy and want to protect him. But he looks at Thorne and he realizes Sam does have to grow. Why are you here, Sam? I know why you got here. I know how. And all of your pain and fears are justified. But why are you here now? And what are you going to do with that? Because if we go north of the wall, you will die. And others around you might die. It's one of my favorite sequences. It's one of my favorite scenes in all of Game of Thrones. All 8 seasons is Alistair Thorne in this moment. And it is something that was put in. Cogman talks about it, and he was a fan of Owen Teale. I'd seen him on stage before. This was to put those kind of complicated layers into Sir Alistair Thorne. And it works for me. Others might disagree, but it works for me. Everything he's saying is true. It's what Thorne does with that truth, I think, is his mistakes. But more importantly, it's what Jon does with these lessons that makes Jon so valuable and important, pure, and in the end, great. We end the show with Catelyn Stark and the action that launches a war. And I want to discuss a little bit here where I am with this now. Ned, early on, season 1, episode 3, warns her of her temper on the road. We talked about that. There's some foreshadowing. For years, and I would go on some of these Game of Thrones shows, and I would unfairly hold Catelyn Stark to the flames. I almost feel like I have to go on an apology tour. Now, I think, and Ned might agree, she does act out of a little temper. She's a Tully, but she got a little Stark flair for the temper dramatics here. I think there was better ways to handle this. She does not have all the information, but also a lot of the information was not going to find its way to her because the information was a lie. I, in the past, have been really, really harsh on Catelyn Stark, saying that this moment launches the war, launches everything, launches the death, and a lot of blood is on her hands. I've said that before. And while I understand my own self, where I was coming from, I don't want to be like Sir Alistair Thorne and take a good truth and harden my heart towards the people behind it. Cersei Lannister says in this episode, we do, what does she say? We do extreme, we sometimes we go to the extremes where our children are concerned. She says that to Ned Stark. Another one of my favorite quotes of this episode. She has a conversation with Cersei, too, early on in the season, where we get a little bit of Cersei and her views on being a mother and connecting to Catelyn Stark over it. I look at this scene now, I look at it, and Michelle Fairley is just amazing. I've always never thought anything less than that. But this scene, it frustrates me because you're like, no, but we know knowledge that Catelyn Stark would never know. And she does this to protect her son, her family, and her house. And she does it because no one else will. She has to do it herself. She knows it. She's got Robb back up at Winterfell. A Stark must always be in Winterfell. She's got all that stuff going on. Her 2 daughters, who she'll never see again, are south. Her husband, who she'll never see again, is too wrapped up in the affairs of the court, understandably maybe, but he's down there and he's not going to help. She went down there to kind of get some more information. She comes back up. She runs into Tyrion Lannister, and at this point in time, you got Baelish whispering in her ear, and Baelish is great at what he does. It's all clouded. The information's clouded. I want to officially, formally apologize to Catelyn Stark for saying that the blood's on your hands. There's always some truths that, they're facts. They are what they are. And our feelings sometimes are washed away by facts, sadly. And there's some things that follow after this. And I think Catelyn makes some more mistakes too, but I will never falter for those mistakes. And this one in particular, despite it launching everything that came after it. It's unfair to put that completely on her, but you know what I mean. After this, it starts getting bad fast. But I think put in that situation, I would hope I would have the courage to do what Catelyn Stark did here. Stand up, speak the truth she knows, speak to those around her who should be loyal to her, and use her power, control her destiny, and do it for the safety of her house, which we all agree is really important in this world, but more importantly, her family, and more specifically, her son. So Catelyn Stark, apologies. Good moment here. Episode stars, it's easy to list almost anyone in this episode, including Michelle Fairley, Sean Beans, Lena Headey, all of them. But I as I mentioned, Owen Teal as Thorne, I think is great. Jamie Sives, or is it Sivs? Jamie Sives as Jory Cassell. Jory's he's one character. He doesn't have much long left in the show. Just great. I just love his, he's not even like a woe's me. It's just like, God bless it. Everyone down here. I wish I was up at Winterfell. Oh my God. I think everyone's a knight. Everyone's, and he's loyal. Not a lot of loyal Not a lot of loyal people down there in King's Landing. And John Bradley as Samwell. It's so key. And he's so fresh and new as a performer, as an actor, but he's right from the get-go just making the right choices and bringing something real wonderful to Samwell Tarly. That has to work going forward in the show. My favorite quotes, we got, I have a tender spot in my heart for cripples, bastards, and broken things. Tyrion, again, I think that's the theme for the entire series. Sir Alistair Thorne, you don't know cold. And Cersei Lannister, sometimes we go to the extremes where our children are concerned. Before we wrap up, though, we got a series of calls here from you. If you have a call, you want to get on the show, you just go to the Anchor app or the Anchor desktop app or desktop portal for Game of Thrones, Casterly Talk. That's me. You click on the call and the call link, and you can leave a message here. Let's go to Sarah Rissling with this one.
Hey, Casterly Talk fans, it's Sarah. I'm calling about episode 4, specifically about Theon and Tyrion and how their chance interaction led to planting the seeds of destruction between the Greyjoy and the Stark households and building this bigger tension that will lead to some significant downfalls for the entire Stark family. I completely forgot about this conversation and was wondering, what other chance meetings are you seeing on your rewatch that now hold way more meaning than the first time you saw them? Thanks.
Wow, that is Sarah's hitting on a couple great things there. Yeah, we talked about the Tyrion Theon scene, and I love what Sarah said, that the truths that Theon has to face, who he is, who he wants to be, and that tension, it unravels him. It destroys him, right? And it does have a lot of ramifications. Should we blame Tyrion here? Maybe. I don't know. If we're going to blame Catelyn for stuff, maybe we'll blame Tyrion too. But I think it does that has way more meaning. As far as things that mean more chance meetings, it's not chance, and nothing with Baelish is chance, but anytime he shows up, anytime he gets in Ned's ear, and anytime with Catelyn, anytime he's working his magic, the gift of having all 8 seasons, or 7 with Baelish behind us, is just him putting all the little seeds of tension all the way through. I don't know. It just I don't know if that specifically answers Sarah's question, but you just to see him work, it's a thing of beauty. But which is why I know a lot of people were upset the way he went out. Which also, by the way, him sitting down at the tourney next to Arya and Sansa and just kind of being all smug and Baelish. I mean, that is interesting now. For Sansa to get a lot of the down low on Sandor definitely means a lot more because she has that knowledge. It's in her heart anytime she interacts with Sandor, and as he starts to help her, the little bird, the little dove, she has that knowledge. So that means more. Those aren't necessarily confrontational type of things, but I like that there. I'll think more about that too and answer that in the things that have more meaning as we go forward. The fun ones is things like you also get Catelyn Stark talking to a Frey, which is bittersweet in its own way. But we'll talk more too about some of the things along the way that mean more and start spinning out into more conflict. Great call, Sarah. But I love that Theon Tyrion stuff. Yeah, that's a great observation, just of what Greyjoy versus Stark in the heart of Theon and what that means. All right, we've got Donald Long. I'm taking these ones live, so let's see what this one's about.
Hey, Casterly Talk. Just wanted to call in this week and finally talk about my personal favorite character in the series, Daenerys. And in this episode, I think about her 2 biggest turning points, not only in the show so far, but also her life. When she finally stands up to not only for herself, but also her unborn child to Viserys' abuse. When she hits him back in the face with the belt, she has a great quote with it. The next time you raise a hand to me will be the last time you have hands. And then later on in the episode, she realizes finally with this quote, "My brother will never take back the 7 kingdoms." We don't really hear her say this part. We kind of see her realize, I'm going to have to do it. It's going to be me that has to take back the 7 kingdoms. And she's going to be the dragon. Thanks.
Yeah, the dragon. Don't wake the dragon. It ain't going to be you, Viserys. Yeah, we talked about up top about some of the truths and all that kind of stuff, but this, her kind of realizing her path. We use the term destiny a lot, but we talk a lot over on Force Center, Joseph Scrimshaw and I, about destiny being just the thing that brings you to the big choice. So Dany's got a lot of choices to make. I don't think destiny, I hate to use it sometimes and get it confused with what's going to happen regardless. There's choices along the way, and Daenerys definitely makes them along the way, for better or worse. But I think she realizes her path, and I think Donald's right. It's kind of like, yeah, you know what? It ain't him. I think I'm going to have to do this. And it's a powerful moment. Dany's a great character, and I know her end frustrates a lot of folks. Very understandable. She frustrated me before that. She's always been one of my favorite characters, but a lot of stuff in season 4 and 5, I was frustrated with her because I wanted her to succeed. So I get it. And her story is a tale of tragedy. It's a tale of tragedy. It is what it is. And we'll talk about that. We have a long way until we get to season 8 when we talk about all that again. We talked about Dorea and Viserys, the bath time, the bathtub of history. Eric has a call about that before we close out the show today.
Hey, Ken and Casterly Talk. So episode 4, Cripples, Bastards, and Broken Things. I love this episode, and I want to talk about the bathtub scene between Dorea and Viserys Targaryen. It's a very, very great scene because there's so much foreshadowing and story that's going to come up that's in the dialogue in this scene. You know, Dorea talks about dragonglass and, you know, a man who can change his face the way ever men change their clothes. But the biggest thing about the scene is Viserys, how when Dorea puts the hot wax on him, he feels it and says ow, which is, of course, sort of a foreshadow of what's going to happen to him. But it also connects back to the pilot with Daenerys, how she got in the bathtub and didn't feel anything. And I'd have to say, I think Harry Lloyd truly was the show's first real villain, even though he wasn't on the show that long, because he was really good as Viserys Targaryen.
Yeah, full praise for Harry Lloyd. Great call, Eric. Yeah, we talked about a lot of that, but yes, I skipped over that. The wax. The clues are all around you, aren't they? Do you want to wake the last dragon? You're getting burnt by candle wax. You ain't no dragon. Yeah, it's there. This is a big scene. Big scene in terms of just things that are to come. We can get into what I also feel is going on with Viserys, his wistful romantic view of the dynasty and his part in it and what will come, and not facing. I mean, he talks about the truth. The dragon skulls get smaller and smaller. It's like the answer's right in front of you. You ain't what you think you are, my friend. And then the wax is dumped on him, and it's like, yeah, you definitely aren't what you think you are. Great scene. Eric and I definitely enjoy that scene. And yes, I know it's two beautiful naked people in a bathtub. What's not to love about sex position in Game of Thrones? Cogman had something interesting to say about that too. And talking about the Game of Thrones sex position, which definitely got a little toned down in the later seasons. I do think that's the case. But season 1, it's ramped up. But he cites Dorea telling Dany, men say a lot of things when they're happy. I'm paraphrasing a little bit. And just how that makes some sense. You know, it makes some sense. Right or wrong, it makes some sense. All right, we are almost out of here. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to hang out with me, going back and looking at the themes and lessons that make Game of Thrones just something that has not left and will never leave a lot of our souls. It's a great story, and we are here to dive into it. Next week, I believe we're going to have a pundit back in the studio with us here. I'll not officially announce it so I can confirm it, but we're going to be going on to episode 5. So if you have any thoughts on that, call in here to Anchor. You want to join that conversation there. I want to tell you about something I'm doing here. We are, if you're watching this before the event happens, I never know, you might be watching these years later. If so, we had a great show. October 10th. 2020. What a great year. October 10th, 7 p.m. Pacific. Mark Riley is presenting Riley's Cantina along with Sean Healy Productions and myself. It is a live stream from El Cid on Sunset Strip. No one in the audience live. You're going to be the audience at home. Tickets are available anywhere. Just go to ticketweb.com, or a more direct link is go to kennapzok.com and go to the shows and events page, and you will see a link to get tickets. We have general access. We have VIP with an exclusive shirt designed by the great Brian Ward, and that will get you into a live Q&A that we'll be doing right from the venue there. Special guests going to be on the show. Going to be a lot of fun. It's a Star Wars kind of comedy variety hour, and we're looking forward to entertaining you during, dark times. Let's do a little Star Wars comedy there. And if you want, again, go to kennapzok.com to the shows and events page, a direct link, or just go search ticketweb.com. All right. That is it for this week. We are out of here. We're going to go to the top of the wall and just stare out at the possibilities that are in front of us. We'll see you next time here on Casterly Talk.